What you're about to watch is one of the most chilling videos ever captured. The day is July 22nd, 1979. The ruling Ba'ath Party in Iraq has just elected their new president, Saddam Hussein. On his first day in office, he calls a meeting at the party headquarters to set the agenda for his upcoming term. With the delegates surrounding him in the Great Hall, he breaks into a speech. In the speech, he tells of a conspiracy he's uncovered in the Ba'ath Party, a conspiracy to overthrow him and prevent him from carrying out his duly elected responsibilities as president. He frames it as a conspiracy against democracy itself. Then a man is escorted onto the stage. He looks tired, broken, under duress. His name is Mu'i Adbek Hussein, a senior Ba'ath Party leader. And as he ascends to the podium, he admits that what Saddam Hussein said was true. There is a wide conspiracy against him. He knows this because he was part of it. He confesses to trying to overthrow Saddam's new government and then starts naming names. Names of other people in the room who are also in on the conspiracy. One by one, as the names are announced, uniformed guards escort each person from the room. In all, 66 men were removed. Fear swept through the gallery as delegates began to realize what was happening. The remaining men began standing and shouting their allegiance with chants of "Long live Saddam" and swearing their loyalty to him to avoid the same fate. Their voices swelled into a panic cacophony as Saddam coolly smoked a cigar, basking in the glory. Then, gunfire echoed through the hall as outside loyalists were handed guns and ordered to execute the men who were removed. In one fell swoop, Saddam Hussein wiped clean anybody that would stand in his way and sent a brutal signal to his party and to the world that he and he alone had full control over the country. This day one coup of the Iraqi government set up a dictatorship that would last for a quarter of a century and became one of the most infamous moments in geopolitical history. This is just one of many examples of how democracies fall to authoritarianism and dictatorships. And today we're going to look at some of the most famous examples, examine how they happen, so that maybe we can keep them from happening again. Removing your perceived enemies, pressuring loyalty from those below you, consolidating power. These are the obvious signs of authoritarian behavior, maybe even dictatorial behavior. But what exactly is a dictator? Like, what defines a dictator? Is there a clear definition of that? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, a dictator is, quote, a leader who has complete power in a country and has not been elected by the people. The Encyclopedia Britannica defines a dictator as, quote, a single person who possesses absolute political power within a country or territory, or a member of a small group that exercises such power. The term comes from Latin. The Romans used it, but they actually used it a little bit differently. For them, it was a title for a temporary magistrate who was granted great power to deal with state crises. So it's kind of like when everything was going bad, we'll appoint a dictator to kind of just run everything for a minute and then get back to normal behavior. But modern dictators are more like ancient tyrants. They rely on force or fraud to gain political power, and they keep this power through intimidation, terror, propaganda, and the suppression of civil liberties. Another term that gets thrown around a lot with dictator stuff is totalitarianism, and while the two are closely related, there is a difference between the two. With totalitarianism, all political institutions are replaced by new ones. Legal, political, social traditions, they're also wiped away. A totalitarian state is a state that is pursuing a singular goal, and all resources are directed toward that goal regardless of anything else. With that said, let's look at some examples of dictators and how they came to power, starting with old Saddam, who we were talking about at the beginning of this video. Saddam Hussein joined the Ba'ath Party in the 1950s and slowly worked his way up through the ranks until the Ba'ath Party led a successful coup in 1968. After that, Saddam was appointed to a high-ranking position as the president's deputy. He used this position over the next decade to consolidate power over the party and the government. He gained control over Iraq's intelligence agencies and its security forces. And one way that he gained support from the populace anyway was he used the oil reserves to improve the country's infrastructure and the healthcare and the educational institutions. A lot of people really appreciated that, but he also used some of that money to target political opponents. He formally took over as president in 1979 and immediately purged the government of any threats, as I mentioned before. And he maintained control and stayed in power by operating secret police and intelligence agencies. He also maintained a cult of personality amongst the people in the country. They kind of looked up to him. They had a cult-like devotion to him. He placed family members in key positions, including his son Uday and Qusay, and he maintained brutal suppression of opposition, especially Kurds and Shias in the area. And he hoarded the massive oil wealth to fund security and military apparatuses. All of this lasted, of course, until the Iraq War, where he was eventually discovered in a spider hole, put on a very quick and brutal trial, and executed. And there was much rejoicing. In the 1930 elections in Germany, the National Socialists won 18.3% of the vote, making them the second largest party in the Reichstag. By 1932, they had 37.3% of the vote, making them the largest party. Just to back up a little bit, the Reichstag was basically the German parliament, and it operated on a proportional representation system. So there were several parties of them. In the Weimar Reichstag, 9 of them actually, and whichever party had the most seats got to appoint a chancellor that led the parliament. The chancellor shared power with the president, who had control of the military. It was kind of like the chancellor handled internal affairs and the president handled foreign policy. That's an oversimplification, but you get the idea. So when the National Socialists gained power in 1933, Hitler was appointed chancellor. He had risen through the ranks to become a party leader over the years through his combination of fiery speeches and popular manifestos. And he did foster coalitions with other parties who joined in with their support because they wanted to use his popularity and cultish devotion by his followers to their advantage. Literally 4 weeks after Hitler was named chancellor, a massive fire broke out in the Reichstag building, which was blamed on a member of the German Communist Party, which just happened to be the main opposition to the National Socialists. In the spirit of never letting a good disaster go to waste, Hitler and the National Socialists passed the Reichstag Fire Decree, and this basically suspended civil liberties and allowed for the arrest of political opponents. By the way, there is still debate to this day over who actually set the Reichstag fire. It was blamed on a Dutch communist named Marinus van der Lubbe, but many also argue that perhaps it was intentionally set by Hitler's goons. Most historians at this point believe that it was just a lucky break for the Nazis, but they, controlled so much of the media around that time, it's kind of hard to say. Regardless, he wasted no time in capitalizing on the event. He used it to cook up conspiracies around the Communist Party and arrested the higher-ups for participating in it. And in March 1933, he pushed through the Enabling Act. This basically gave him dictatorial powers and allowed his cabinet to create laws without the Reichstag's approval. In practice, this basically outlawed other parties. Over the next year, Hitler continued to solidify control over the party, but there were still some powerful members from the early days that carried a lot of influence. Many of them were opposed to his tactics, like having his own private paramilitary groups. So to solidify his power over the party, Hitler and his inner circle carried out the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934, where in one night they systematically raided and executed over 80 high-ranking party members, claiming they were, of course, in on some vast conspiracy against him and, by extension, the country. In just a few months after that, in August of 1934, the German president Paul von Hindenburg died. Before you start thinking there were some shenanigans there or whatever, he died of natural causes. He was 86 years old. But in that vacancy, Hitler declared that conspiring forces were too strong at the moment to hold an election for president, so he just appointed himself president, temporarily, and then combined the roles of chancellor and president into one role, the Führer. At that point, there was no opposition, and he became the sole and absolute ruler of Germany. So Fidel Castro is a guy who was just always fighting for something. I mean, when he was 21, he joined a group of revolutionaries trying to topple the government in the Dominican Republic. The next year, in 1948, he was speaking to the Conference of American States in Bogota, Colombia, arguing against the influence of non-Latin Americans in Latin America. He got his law degree and continued being politically active until he ran for office in 1952. He didn't win, but it didn't really matter because later that year, Fulgencio Batista seized power in a military coup. He basically suspended the Constitution and canceled elections after that. In opposition to that, Castro formed his own paramilitary group he called the Movement to oppose Batista, and in July of 1953, they launched an attack on the Moncada barracks. He thought that if they were successful at taking over a military base, it would inspire the rest of the country to revolution. They failed, and it didn't. Castro was arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison. But he used the notoriety and publicity around his trial as a chance to kind of outline his vision for a free Cuba. He gave a fiery speech that's going to be called the History Will Absolve Me speech, which gave him national recognition, and his movement only grew from there. Over time, public pressure mounted on the Batista government to free Castro, which they did in 1955, but they basically just banned him from Cuba after that. So he fled to Mexico, continued building his movement, which was now called the July 26th movement, after the day that they did the attack on the barracks. And with the help of Che Guevara, he secretly sailed back to Cuba and engaged in guerrilla warfare. By the way, Che Guevara, you guys should probably not be celebrating this guy. He was not a good dude. Castro was able to win over the workers and the peasants of the country by basically promising to leave after only 2 years. He basically said, give me 2 years in office and I'll bring back democracy. Power to the people. And it was especially easy to win them over at the time because by 1958, Batista was extremely unpopular. Tons of corruption, repression, lots of economic problems. Castro's forces began taking over larger and larger areas of Cuba until Batista saw the writing on the wall and fled the country. Castro declared victory in January 1959. And true to his word, he only stayed in office for 50 years. Yeah, he never really got around to the whole stepping down thing. Maybe because he was busy taking over every agency in the government and filling it with cronies and family members. He effectively created a cult of personality around himself, communicating directly with his people over the radio waves, and nationalized industries, bringing it all under his control. But yeah, he stayed in power and became an important world figure for just under 50 years. He left office in 2008 when he handed control over to his brother. His brother, Raul Castro, who just left office in 2021. In the early 1970s in Chile, inflation was high, there were shortages of basic goods, and tons of strikes by groups opposed to the government. Things got so chaotic by August of 1973 that General Pinochet was appointed as commander-in-chief of the Chilean army to help maintain order. But eventually he got it in his head that the only way to really maintain order is to just take over the whole government. So on September 11th, 1973, Pinochet led a military coup against the Chilean government. Other Chilean military leaders helped coordinate the coup. Thousands of President Allende supporters were arrested, tortured, or executed after the coup. Pinochet emerged as the head of a four-man military junta and quickly established himself as the primary leader. This, as you will see as a pattern, is when Pinochet eliminated all of his political opposition. The junta dissolved Congress, banned political parties, and implemented strict censorship, closing down opposition media. And of course, a state of emergency was declared, giving sweeping military powers to control public life. By 1974, he declared himself supreme leader and officially assumed the title of president. Pinochet ruled with an iron fist. The government basically established a powerful secret police force that targeted perceived opponents of Pinochet, and more than 1,000 Chileans were detained, tortured, or disappeared during his rule. He stepped down as dictator in 1990, but remained as commander-in-chief of the military until 1998, and he was brought up in international war crimes charges later on in his career. It does also need to be said before the comments fly in, yes, the CIA did sort of help him out a bit with the coup that put him in power. Now, a bit of a similarity you might have noticed in the last four stories is that, they're all men. And throughout history, dictators have primarily been men. Then again, so have world leaders in general. And yes, there have been strong female leaders and wives of dictators that weren't liked by their country's population, but they never really rose to the definition of a dictator, most of them anyway. The closest we have to a modern-age female dictator is Indira Gandhi, who is no relation to Mahatma Gandhi. She ruled India as its prime minister from the 1960s to the 1980s. She came to power as the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the head of the Indian National Congress. One of the dictatorial things she did was declare a state of emergency in 1975, which suspended civil liberties, opposition leaders were arrested, that whole thing. She ended the state of emergency 2 years later, held elections, lost, and stepped down. So this does bend the rules of the dictatorship thing just a little bit, because she was democratically elected, of course, so were many other dictators, and she did eventually step down. She was technically only a dictator for 2 years under that state of emergency. But hey, female dictator, they exist. Another thing you might have noticed about all those examples is that they're all from the 20th century. Surely Y2K didn't end dictatorship, did it? No, it's actually thriving in 60 different countries today. 60 countries are led by dictators as we speak. First, you've got Kim Jong-un from North Korea, one of the more famous ones. He inherited power from his father, Kim Jong-il, and he maintains strict control through a personality cult, military loyalty, strict media and internet control, isolation from the outside world, and a vast surveillance system. You've got Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Egypt. He came to power through a military coup. He was a former military chief. He restricts political opposition, controls the media, and uses his own security forces to maintain order. Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus is often called Europe's last dictator. He won contested elections since 1994, strictly controls media and security forces, and suppresses opposition and protests. And there was a particularly notable crackdown after the 2020 elections that has gotten the world's attention. Venezuela has Nicolas Maduro, who succeeded Hugo Chavez, who was a bit of a dictator of his own. He maintains power through military support and controls state resources and media, has overseen an economic crisis that's seen the value of their currency plummet, and opposition leaders are often imprisoned or exiled. So looking at that list of dictators, we can see that there are different kinds. It usually comes down to the methods that they use to obtain power and then how they maintain that power. In their book, Dictators and Dictatorships, Understanding Authoritarian Regimes and Their Leaders, Natasha M. Ezro and Erica Franz offer 5 types of dictatorships. There's the military dictatorship, where power is obtained and maintained through the military. Military often takes control of the country through a coup usually, installs a dictator of its choosing, which is most often the highest ranking military officer, and uses force to preserve its power. Then you got your old school monarchies, where power is obtained and passed on through family connections. It's sort of a turducken of autocracy, monarchy, and dictatorship. Then there's personalistic dictatorships, where the leader may be supported by a party or a military but maintains overwhelming majority of power. These usually rely heavily on their charisma to maintain control. They're known to put loyalists in positions of power, whether they're qualified or not, and they foster cults of personality to sway public opinion to their side. And they also usually employ secret police and violence to silence critics. Then there's what they call a single-party dictatorship. It's also called a dominant party dictatorship or a one-party state. Multiple political parties may exist, but one dominates the government, makes all the rules, and is free to disseminate propaganda, controls every aspect of every election, ensuring that they win every time. After authoritarian monarchies, these tend to be the longest-lasting dictatorships, as they can more easily install a new dictator if the existing one leaves office or dies. And of course you have hybrid dictatorships, or kind of a blend of elements of the other four types. Examples include personalist military dictatorships, like that one of Pakistan from 1977 to 1988, and the single-party military hybrid that controlled El Salvador from 1948 to 1984. So while there are different types of dictatorships, the ultimate question is, why do they actually come to power in the first place? As we've seen, the most common method is through a military coup. It's usually quick and violent with immediate control of the armed forces. And it's usually done to justify restoring order. Examples of this are Pinochet in Chile, which I just talked about, but also Gaddafi in Libya. Another way it tends to happen is through democratic backsliding, where institutions are gradually eroded. These types of dictators often rise up through the government by being elected legitimately at first, and then they weaken the media, pack courts with loyalists, and just change the country's constitution. Examples include Hitler, as I talked about before, and Venezuela's Hugo Chavez. There are also revolutionary takeovers that create dictators. Some of the most common features of this method are mass mobilizations and ideological justification for violence. Examples include Castro and Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini. Inheritance or dynasty is another method. Its features include established loyalty networks and built-in power structures. There's also usually a cult of personality around these dictators too, including North Korea's Kim family and Syria's Assad family. And dictators can often arise from a party takeover. The methods include building a loyalty system and eliminating rivals. These examples are Saddam Hussein and Joseph Stalin. I could go on, but the point is, look, every dictator is different, but there are similarities in how dictators come to power. A playbook, if you will. They often exploit moments of crisis or instability. Autocrats kind of thrive in moments of chaos because psychologically people want stability, and they'll support a strong man to get that stability, even if that's the person that caused the chaos in the first place. They'll often use that unrest as an excuse to impose martial law or suspend the Constitution, basically give themselves emergency powers that they rarely ever give up. It's also not uncommon for them to just push their opponents to the point of violence so that they can use that violence as an excuse to take over, which they do by gaining control of security forces. Now this might be the actual government military or police forces, or it might be a formation of their own personal security forces. Because they can pontificate and bluster all they want, but eventually they need that, brute force to bend people to their will. And then do things like eliminate their opposition. Now this can be done through electoral shenanigans, but it can also mean jailing, banishing, or just straight up executing them. Dictators want to control the media, especially the cult of personality types. They want people to be hearing only the good things about themselves, or just to saturate the media with stories about themselves to maintain relevance in people's lives. This can mean jailing or executing journalists under the guise of defending the state against treasonous messaging. It can also be done through disinformation campaigns to just flood the media with false and contradictory facts to confuse people and sow that chaos that they love so much. They maintain strict economic control by nationalizing industries and directing government money to their friends in industries that are favorable to them and away from others that aren't. This can also be weaponized against the populace by keeping people too poor and hungry to rebel, or they can go the opposite way and just shower the populace with gifts and infrastructure to secure their allegiance. And of course, they carefully maintain loyalty networks. Dictatorships are not a meritocracy. They're a, I'll suck up to this guy and he'll put me in a position of power-ocracy. Nothing is more important to a dictator than unquestioning loyalty. And they'll often make examples of those around them to show what happens if you're not loyal enough. Like, I imagine the most stressful job on planet Earth is being in Kim Jong-un's inner circle. You just always got a target on your head. Now, it's no secret that countries around the world are leaning more authoritarian these days. Even here in the US, people are embracing things that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. And again, it's because there's a lot of things freaking people out. There's a lot of chaos out there. Climate change, the pandemic and its knock-on effects, erosion of cultural institutions, economic insecurity. And by the way, we do not talk about this nearly enough, but we are smack dab in the middle of a revolution in communications technology. We've gotten so used to the internet at this point that we forget how new it is, especially since smartphones and social media morphed it into what it currently is. We're still kind of trying to figure out what the world is going to be with this thing. And every single revolution in communications technology has been followed by social upheaval. From the printing press to the radio to the TV, these things shake up society. And this revolution has happened so fast, and it's changing so fast, and it's so pervasive in our lives that, yeah, we're going to struggle with this. I don't know how bad this current wave of authoritarianism is going to be, but I do think that it is a product of this moment. And the thing about moments is they pass. It might get worse before it gets better, because dictators almost always take things too far and the pendulum is always swinging, but very few dictator stories have a happy ending. As for what you can do, first of all, just be educated on how dictatorships work so you can keep your eye out for the signs. There's a great book I have here somewhere, but of course I can't find it now. It's called On Tyranny. I'll put a picture up. It's fantastic for that. And have a line. What's your line? What's the thing that is a bridge too far for you? And talk about it. Talk about it with your friends. Talk about it with your family. Talk about their line and hold them to it. Authoritarianism is a creeping thing, and it often relies on people constantly moving their goalposts, just kind of letting things creep a little bit further and a little bit further until you don't even recognize things anymore. So have a line. Convince others around you to have a line and stick to it. Like something that I noticed a lot of these dictators did was they nationalized the food system, and then they had to institute rations when their food production went down, usually because the person they put in charge was a loyal buddy and not an expert. That's exactly what happened in Cuba, actually, with Che Guevara. Again, he was not a good guy. But thankfully for now anyway, food is plentiful in most parts of the world. In fact, you can have delicious food delivered right to your door with today's sponsor, Factor. In case you're not aware, Factor is a meal delivery service that sends you fresh, never frozen meals right to your doorstep. And the best part is, it's healthy, because they're made with the help of professional dietitians to make sure they meet your nutritional needs. Plus, they ethically source their ingredients. Actually, no, the best part is they're delicious, because they're designed by professional chefs. It's basically restaurant quality meals, which makes it a million times better than frozen dinners. Actually, no. The best part is that they have a wide variety of meals that fit any meal plan, whether you're going for calorie smart, keto, protein plus, vegan and veggie, no matter what kind of food you like, they've got you covered. Actually, you know what? No. The best part, the actual best part, is the fact that they're so quick and convenient to eat. Do you have any idea how much time I used to take out of my working day to figure out what to eat? It was the bane of my existence. But with Factor, it's 2 minutes in the microwave and I'm eating. Just super quick. Actually, who am I kidding? The best part, for real, the best part is the price, because it's way less expensive than ordering out at a restaurant. It's actually less expensive than going to the store and buying all the ingredients separately, not to mention you get a variety of flavors you might not have access to where you live. Now, I am an actual customer of Factor. They sponsored a few videos a while back and I liked it so much, I just decided to just pay for it and be a customer. And the reason that I like it so much is because it just makes things simple. Like, I want to eat healthy, but I want it to taste good. I want something quick and easy, but I don't want to pay through the nose. I want to be full, but not eat too much. This is just that nice little sweet spot. Mostly I'm lazy, and this is truly a lazy man's meal service. So if you want to give it a try, just head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code 50JoeScott to get 50% off, plus free shipping on your first Factor box. Because the only thing better than great food is great food at half the price. So one more time, it's factor75.com or scan the handy QR code on screen, enter code 50JoeScott, get 50% off your first box, plus free shipping. Give it a try. I think you'll like it. Alright, so that's the video for today. Thank you guys for watching. If you would like to look at another video, I'm going to put the video that I made for accelerationism up here. It's the idea that like everything's going to fall apart cyclically, so let's just pull off the band-aid and get through it. Some people believe in it, others don't. This video got a billionaire to tweet angrily at me. That was fun. So you can check out the video, any of them that are on the side or below that have my face on them, you can check them out. I invite you to watch them, and if you enjoy it and you're not subscribed, I invite you to subscribe. I come back with videos every Monday. Big thanks to the Answer Files on Patreon and the channel members who are supporting this channel with their wallets. It's deeply appreciated, and they've formed an awesome community. You can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe or just click the join link down below to be a member, and I thank you for that. All right, that's it for today. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week. Stay safe, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.